welcome back to Psychedelics Today. This is Joe Moore coming at you from Breckenridge, Colorado. Beautifully high in the mountains. Amazing sunny day here, almost 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Great stuff. So today on the show, we do something a little different. We actually have a masterclass from Navigating Psychedelics that we're going to play here for you. It is with our breathwork teacher, Elizabeth Gibson from Dreamshadow. And we get into a lot of stuff. We talk a little bit about an MDMA session she had way back that was really helpful for her, and we talk about breath work. And I think you all might find it interesting because it's where Kyle and I come from. If you listen to the show and you're curious about our background, this is a good glimpse into that and the relationship we have with Elizabeth. So I think you'll like it. If you like the show, you'll like this. And what we're doing is releasing a sample of what exists in our Navigating Psychedelics course, so you can get a better taste for it and see if it's something you might be into. This is really a foundational course. Anybody from a physician to a therapist to a college student would benefit from this. It's not necessarily geared towards clinical people, but clinical people find it very helpful. We have a number of folks who are professionals that have taken it and have really appreciated it. Again, we've mentioned this in the show before, but money back guarantee, 100% 30-day money back guarantee, and even beyond that, if you hate it and you want your money back, just let us know. We'll happily refund you. And you can learn more about the class at psychedelicstoday.com, or specifically at our school, where there's a bunch of actual free courses at psychedelicstoday.teachable.com. And links to that site exist from our main site and all of our socials too. So feel free to check it out. And I've got a whole bunch of t-shirts sitting around in my house, Psychedelics Today t-shirts that we took to the Phoenix conference. So if you guys want shirts, check them out on our shop, psychedelicstodayshop.com. And we've got plenty of great stuff there. So without further ado, here is our masterclass with Elizabeth Gibson, and we'll see you on the other side.
Welcome to the Psychedelics Today exclusive interview for the Self-Care and Integration course. Today we are here with Elizabeth Gibson of Dreamshadow Breathwork. Elizabeth has been Joe and I's teacher my teacher for about 6 years or so, and Joe for a little bit longer.
2003.
Yeah. And we're here today to talk about integration and breathwork. So thanks for joining us today, Elizabeth. It's great to have you on.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. So I guess to dig in, what does integration mean to you?
Well, it's a big topic and a really important topic to me. To me, integration is one of the most important aspects of work with extraordinary experiences. How do you take material that's come up for you and bring it into your everyday life? That's where the real benefit of this work comes. And I think it's a topic that's often overlooked. So how do people go back out into the world and realize the benefits of the intense inner work that they've done? That's what it's about for me. Is helping people figure out how to do that and supporting them in that process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess to backtrack a little bit, you've been facilitating breathwork for, almost 20 years at this point? And you've also had...
23. It's 23. Yeah, 23 years.
Yeah, and then you've also had, you were part of some MDMA trials back in the 80s, right, when it was legal. And so you've been in this work for a while, working with people with non-ordinary states and doing this integration work for a bit.
Trying to, yeah.
Yeah, it was actually an interesting fact to note is that you helped co-write the protocol for the MDMA studies for MAPS.
Well, I didn't really write it, Joe. I edited the treatment manual for MDMA-assisted psychotherapy.
Right.
Michael Mithofer and some of the MAPS researchers developed the initial drafts of that document, and I helped edit it and tweak it a little bit. So I was involved in the process of the revisions of the original document.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's great. Was there some integration discussion involved in that manual?
I'd have to go back at the manual and look.
Right.
The manual is actually posted at the MAPS website so that anybody can look at it. And it's a great resource, for people who are running workshops or working with people in these kinds of experiences. And I know that the manual does address follow-up work because MAPS has a whole protocol around what happens before, during, and then after a session. They do a lot of follow-up work with the people that do the MDMA-assisted psychotherapy. So that aspect of it is definitely addressed in the treatment manual.
Cool. So what are some, I don't know, what's maybe the most important thing you see people maybe not do adequately to try to integrate?
Well, I think, the basic principle that we always remind people of when they're leaving a workshop or leaving a session that's involved in intense experience of any kind is the ongoing nature of the process. So a lot of people especially people who are new to this work, tend to think it's all about the session. And the session, of course, is extremely important, but the process continues after the session is over. And for some people, the intense emotions or material that's begun to come up during the session, it's a very organic process, and it can continue in the days and weeks after the session has actually taken place. So it's really important to remind people that it's important to give themselves space and to allow that process to continue and to really respect what's going on inside and not try to jump right back into everyday life and the demands of work, given that, for many people, that's a very difficult thing because they all have, people have jobs and families and relationships that they're going back to. But to remind them to remember the ongoing nature of the process and that it's not all about the few hours of the session.
Mm-hmm.
And I think all of us who have done this work ourselves personally, I remember after when I did MDMA-assisted psychotherapy back in the 80s, I can remember for days afterwards just kind of yearning to get back in the space I had been in. It seemed like such a sweet experience, and my life outside of the session seemed pale by experience. And it's almost if I was trying to get back to where I had been in the session instead of understanding that I needed to pay attention to what was happening to myself right now in the moment and reconnect with myself in that way. I think that's really what integration is about, is learning to be more present and authentic with ourselves in the moment, no matter what we're doing, whether we're in an intense session or even something as mundane as washing the dishes.
Yeah, you make some really great points. Me and Joe put that quote, "Chop wood, carry water," in our presentation in this course. But also the fact that it probably seems like people want to jump back into sessions again. Like, I think we brought up the fact that people may want to just go back and do ayahuasca ceremonies over and over again. Maybe not because of the purging aspect, but just continuously taking drugs to maybe stay in that state or go back and do a bunch of breathwork sessions to move through some stuff. And I think it is important to have that downtime and really be able to embody it and really know what that means.
I agree, Kyle. I think a lot of the changes that come about as a result of doing this work are subtle changes. The dramatic changes are fairly obvious and maybe don't need as much attention in the sense that with the subtle changes, they can be easily overlooked. And, you know, the long-term changes that take place over time, those are the ones that I think you really want to honor and respect and give space to allow that to happen in yourself.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any tips or advice to how to stay in the moment after a session for the next week or a couple months to really embody what just happened?
Yeah, well, that's the challenge. And I think that it really is a very individual thing. There are specific techniques that can be used. And I was looking at Stan Groff's book on holotropic breathwork this morning, and he has, in the index of that book, he has a couple of entries for integration, and he talks about specific kinds of techniques that can be helpful for people after they do this kind of work. And, you know, it's the kinds of techniques that allow you to tap into yourself, be it whatever kind of form meditation works for you. Some people like sitting meditation. Some people like more active kinds of meditation like Tai Chi. Some people can't really connect with meditation at all. And there can be more other kinds of activities like I remembered when I read Stan's passage that he used to recommend for people who had intense kinds of physical experiences that aerobic exercise like swimming, running, for people who might be inclined in that way, who are more physically active, just as a way of connecting with the kind of energy and feelings that are operating at the deeper levels. So for me, I always have found it helpful to journal about my experiences in the days afterwards, not right after an experience because I'm not that verbal yet, which is why initially after a breathwork session, for instance, we offer drawing materials so people can just work with shapes and colors and begin to work with their experiences symbolically on that level before even putting words to them. But then maybe a day or two later, I always find it really helpful to write about my experience. And I notice if I keep up the process of journaling in the days moving forward from there, I'm apt to stay more connected with the feelings of the experience.
Mm.
But again, it's whatever works for an individual person to create space for themselves to just sink into themselves. And basically that means some kind of ongoing form of practice, daily practice, whatever works. And that's a very personal and individual kind of thing. And we've all, I know, tried in our lives to stick to some kind of practice. We've tried lots of things. And what I've learned over the years is, for me, I have to make my practice manageable. I can't try and make it too big. So I've learned, for me, if I do something every morning for about half an hour, that's probably the most realistic expectation I can have for myself. So I like to do yoga and Tai Chi, and I like to journal, some combination or at least one of those, ideally in the morning. But then during the day, think what you guys like to do to nurture and support yourselves. Like get outside, go for a walk, connect with nature, to work it into your daily life as much as you can so it's not like a separate kind of thing that becomes one more thing to do every day that you may not get to.
Right. And then if you start acting that way, then you start beating yourself up that you're not practicing. So, yeah. I know that happens to me. I'm like, I should really meditate more. And it's like, well, why am I beating myself up over it?
Yeah. But do you find that? I mean, I do. I know that if I do something first thing in the morning, then if I wait till the end of the day, it's less likely that it's going to happen. So
Absolutely.
My Tai Chi teacher used to say, just do it before you think too much about it. Just get up and do it.
Yeah.
Is there any, so like, that maybe is kind of a list of things to look for, to do. Can you think of any things not to do that might impact integration in a negative way?
That's a really interesting question, Joe. Things not to do. I think it's important not to isolate yourself after you do this kind of work. So that in addition to the whole principle of the ongoing nature of the process, I think the principle of community is really important. I've come to appreciate the community around breath work over the years so much, the relationships that build and the support that people offer each other. I really think we can't do this kind of work completely on our own. We need support not just during the sessions, but in the days and weeks, months, and even years between sessions. We need support. We need to be able to talk with people about our experiences. We need to process our experiences verbally. I mean, we're very social animals as human beings, and we thrive in group kinds of settings. Now, some people at first are put off by group experiences and prefer to work one-on-one, maybe with a guide or a therapist, and that's fine, but usually there's at least one other person involved, somebody who can help you get through the rough spots in a way that's supportive and not overly directive. Mm-hmm. And that can be a good friend as much as a therapist or an experienced facilitator.
Yeah. And what's Lenny's saying, we're the descendants of very successful tribes. Yeah,
we're all the descendants of successful tribes. So that's part of our heritage. And I think in our modern culture, that's something that's missing. And you see a lot of people just yearning for that kind of communal experience. A lot of people who come to our workshops, I see them get so much meaning and joy out of just the personal connections that are made. A lot of people are simply lonely and just need that kind of contact and the building of community and relationships.
Yeah. It makes me think a lot about rites of passages, how those are formed, say, in some of those traditional cultures where maybe the adolescent would go out and you'd have this experience, but then they'd have the safety net of the elders and the container and the community to come back to. And when we have these really big experiences now, I mean, we might have a few people to talk to, but we don't really have that community to come back to. I know after my near-death experience, it's like, whoa, who do I talk to about this now? I can't really talk to my parents about it. And, I had to leave to find that. And I found it in Burlington, and I found it in the breath work with you and Lenny. And so.
But I remember that about you, Kyle, and that was a process that took many years for you to build that kind of community. Mm-hmm. So as a young teenager, that was really, as I understand it, that was one of the hardest aspects of it afterwards, was that you didn't have anybody you felt you could really talk to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's been one of the biggest integration pieces for me when I think about integration. It's like, how do you just be okay with sometimes the people around you and learn how to just embody that experience, even though you can't talk to that person necessarily, but how do you continue to be in relationship with them and not feel so isolated?
Well, that kind of goes back to your last question, Joe, of what not to do. So Kyle just touched on that really when he mentioned who you can't talk to about these experiences. So I think it's important to search out people who you know will be supportive and understanding, and not share your experiences with people who might discount or trivialize your experience because they just don't understand this kind of work. And so that can be lonely if it's somebody important in your life that you can't discuss these kinds of experiences with.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely a big dilemma.
Yeah. Do you have any tips or advice to maybe work through anything that arises after a workshop or an experience? We talk about the process continuing, but maybe how to work with some of that stuff that comes up in the next coming weeks to months?
Well, so if there's somatic stuff coming up in the body, it can be really helpful to go get some body work after a session. A really good deep tissue massage or any kind of work that's going to help resolve things that might still be coming up in the body. And we're fortunate now in this day and age, there's so many different kinds of body work out there. So that can be extremely helpful. And then those of us who are holding the space for people and supporting this kind of work, I think it's looking on us to make ourselves accessible to people after the sessions and say that we're, to the extent that we can be available for them to reach out and contact us if they're having trouble. So that they know there's somebody who understands what they've been through, who's there for them to listen to them. I mean, sometimes people just need to talk. It's not like you have to do much else than just listen and support them with your attention. People need to be heard and feel that what they're experiencing, isn't totally abnormal, but is just a normal part of their process. That can be all they need, maybe. Just a friend or a person who understands that they can talk with.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
That ties into a lot of what we've been talking about lately, where maybe you have these integration groups, but that's the essence of it right there, is just to talk and be heard.
And I love the idea of the integration groups that you guys are doing. I mean, I think that's exactly the kind of format that will help fill in the space in between experiential sessions and give people the sense of community and belonging. I mean, look at the whole AA thing, the fact that that's done as group work. I mean, people struggling with, in the addiction field, they go to groups that meet regularly where they can talk about their experiences and share them and feel that kind of support. And that's been an incredibly successful approach over the years. So I think your idea of having these integration groups is exactly the kind of approach that's going to be helpful for people who are struggling with integrating extraordinary experiences. I'm really happy you're doing that.
Thank you. Yeah, part of it too is, we come to your workshop for a weekend, have these really close connections, have these really powerful experiences. And then in between, it's like, oh, where's that community? So part of it for me is like, how do we keep it going? How do we keep the conversation going and finding those people that we can support and hold space for? So the process can continue and it's still still healing with it.
And technology has made that easier too. I mean, look at what we're doing right now, and the fact that even as an email group, you can continue sharing. It definitely has its limitations, but it's better than nothing.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting. Email is an interesting format. From what I've seen, people can either super undershare or maybe there's a sweet spot, but sometimes I'll see people just send stuff every single day. But it's, something that I think is really valuable and maybe we should explore that too.
We had a few.
It's important to be aware of the limitations and the value both. I mean, the problem with email is if somebody really pours themselves into an email and sends it out to the whole group and then doesn't hear back, that can be hard. And I think it's just important to explain to the group the limitations of email, encourage them to use it. But if people really need connection, to encourage them to, call you on the phone or reach out in other ways too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say we had a few email threads going after a few workshops, and it was great. But then, they start trickling off and people get caught up in other emails. And so I think that's part of the limitation, or sitting down and having to write it versus like maybe just connecting on Zoom or Skype really quick. It's a lot easier to verbalize instead of type it out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So you'll on a semi-regular basis, Elizabeth, follow up with people who have been to your workshops and kind of talk to them a bit?
Well, it depends. I mean, Lenny and I make it clear that we're available to correspond with people. And then we leave it up to them. I mean, we don't want to sort of insert ourselves in people's lives unless they reach out to us. So we leave it up to them. Facebook is an interesting way that people are connecting up now, and I see there are lots of groups forming on Facebook, and I see people in our groups keeping in touch with each other on Facebook, and that's kind of sweet to see. Mm-hmm. But like with our 5-day group that just concluded a week ago today, I am going to send out a message to the group today or tomorrow just saying, well, it's been a week now. Does anybody want to talk about how they're doing or what has worked well for them and what hasn't worked so well for them in the last week since they left the workshop? Partly prompted by having this interview with the two of you, and think that it would be a good way to discuss integration with a group that's going through it right now and kind of see what they have to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then you guys also touch on try not to make any big changes in the next 6 months. Can you speak about that?
Yeah, well, that a lot of times people take material that comes up in their sessions. There's a tendency maybe to take it literally and think that to interpret their session in a certain way that makes them think, oh, that means I need to leave my job right now, or I need to end this relationship now. And we encourage people to maybe sit with that for a little while before they act on it, to be sure that things have settled and that they've had some time to process their experience a little more before making any major life decisions. But there are no hard and fast rules about that. It's just something to be aware of. People can have amazing insights in extraordinary experiences that can be taken literally. But sometimes, as you know, there are many levels to these experiences, and you have to treat them symbolically or metaphorically. So it's just a caveat, but not a hard and fast rule.
Yeah, I remember one session I felt really stuck at my job, and I was like, I really just want to quit. And then I had all this emotion come up, and then, it was actually really strange how it unfolded. I think after 2 or 3 weeks after the session, my boss decided to just close up the shop and gave us a week's notice. And I was like, well, I guess that worked itself out.
Yeah.
Yeah. The amount of times I've wanted to quit my job has been incredible. Various jobs, and especially after breathwork, you're just like, it'd be a lot simpler to just move to Costa Rica and be on some eco village and in the tropic and be with all these hippies instead of, commuting into Boston or whatever. Traffic, and these are things you can maybe it hints at a more perfect state, but maybe just make these small steps towards that, and to become substantially happier through small steps.
Yeah, I mean, I like the image of seeds being planted, and you need to give the experience or some time to just unfold and see what comes of it and see what you want to cultivate from it, and be careful about making any big decisions right away. I mean, I wouldn't advise that anyway, and certainly not right after an intense experience like this.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, I think we're at about 20 minutes. Is there any additional points you might want to raise before we kind of wrap up here?
About integration, let me think. Be sure we've covered. I would just encourage people to reach out when they feel like they're having difficulty or trouble understanding something that might be going on, and knowing that there are all kinds of groups out there, and to be sure that when they do this kind of work, they do it in a safe setting, and that they have access to people who will be able to support them afterwards. And the MAPS website is a really good resource for understanding this aspect of the work. I think there's material there about safety, set and setting. So to keep all of those considerations in mind, I would just end with that reminder.
Awesome.
You're never alone, and people do want to help you.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Elizabeth Gibson, thank you very much. You can find her website at dreamshadow.com.
Thank you.
All right.
Take care. Thank you.
And there you have it, Elizabeth Gibson of Dreamshadow. She has been a huge influence on Kyle and I, and we really hope you all take a moment to check out their website. If you want to learn more, they've got a mailing list on their site too. We're working closely with them to develop a breathwork training program. So if that's of interest to you, check them out, dreamshadow.com. And if you want to support us, we've got a Patreon where you can donate $1 or $2 a month or more. And that helps us keep the lights on over here. We've also got books for sale. You can check us out on Amazon. We've got the integration book and the trip journal. And you can find PDF digital copies at Psychedelics Today shop.com. So I guess that's it for now. Let us know what you think of the show, though. Psychedelics Today email at gmail.com, or bring it to the Psychedelics Today Facebook group. So it's just Psychedelics Today group on Facebook. So hope you enjoy it, and hope to hear from you soon. See you all next week. Bye-bye.